They Do It With Mirrors by Agatha Christie. Chapter 1. Ruth Van Rydok was beautifully dressed. Her face, with its expensive makeup, appeared almost girlish at a distance. Her hair was more blue than grey, and perfectly styled. Everything that money could do for Mrs. Van Rydok had been done. Ruth Van Rydok smiled at her friend. "Do you think most people would guess, Jane, that you and I are the same age?" Miss Marple answered loyally,
"Not for a moment, I'm sure. I'm afraid, you know, that I look every day of my age."
Miss Marple was white-haired, with a soft pink and white wrinkled face and innocent blue eyes. She looked a very sweet old lady. Nobody would have called Mrs. Van Rydok a sweet old lady. "I guess you do, Jane," said Mrs. Van Rydok. She grinned suddenly. "And so do I, only not in the same way." She sat on a silk-covered chair. "Jane, I want to talk to you." Miss Marple leant forward to listen carefully. She looked out of place in this grand bedroom of an expensive hotel, dressed as she was in old-fashioned black and carrying a large shopping bag. "I'm worried, Jane, about Carrie Louise."
"Carrie Louise?"
Miss Marple repeated. Oh, the name took her a long way back, to the exciting days before the First World War, when she was a student in Florence, sharing an apartment with two American sisters. They had been very different to young Jane Marple, quietly brought up in a gentle English cathedral town. Ruth was tall and full of energy, while Carrie Louise was small, delicate, and dreamy. But both had that direct American way of talking, and she had liked them at once. "When did you last see Carrie Louise, Jane?"
"Oh, not for many years. Of course, we still send cards at Christmas."
Such a strange thing, friendship. She, young Jane Marple, and the two Americans had separated after school, and yet the old affection was still there. And it was strange that Ruth, whose home, or rather homes, had been in America, was the sister Jane had seen more often. No, perhaps not strange. Every year or two, Ruth had come over to Europe, rushing from London to Paris, onto the Riviera, and back again, but she always saw her old friends. There had been many affectionate meetings like this one. However, Jane had not seen Carrie Louise for 20 years, although Carrie Louise lived in England. But this was natural, because when you live in the same country as an old friend, but have very different lives, you do not meet. The paths of Jane Marple and Carrie Louise did not cross. It was as simple as that.
"Why are you worried about Carrie Louise, Ruth?"
asked Miss Marple. "In a way, that's what worries me most. I don't know."
"She's not ill?"
"She's very delicate, always has been, but no worse than usual."
"Unhappy?"
"Oh, no." No, it wouldn't be that, thought Miss Marple. It was difficult to imagine Carrie Louise being unhappy. "Carrie Louise," said Ruth Van Rydok, "has always believed that everyone is like her, good-natured and with a kind heart. She was always the one of us who had ideals. Of course, it was the fashion when we were young to have ideals. We all had them. It was the proper thing for young girls. You were going to nurse lepers, Jane, and I was going to be a nun. But we got over all that nonsense. Marriage certainly makes you face the real world. Still, marriage has worked well for me." That was true, thought Miss Marple. Ruth had been married 3 times, each time to a wealthy man, and each divorce had increased her bank balance without making her in the least bitter. "Of course," said Miss Van Rydok, "I've always been tough. I've not expected too much of men, and had no regret."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?